So the other day I went to a steakhouse for a friend's birthday and she ordered a steak and the waitress goes, "How do you want your cow cooked?" And I'm like, that's a weird way to order it, but whatever. So she asked my friend, "How do you want your cow cooked?" My friend says, "I want it medium rare," or something like that. And so then I wasn't in the mood for a steak. I wanted a hamburger. I'd been craving a hamburger. So I order, the cheeseburger. And she goes, "How do you want your cow cooked?" And I kind of like awkwardly look at my friend because I was like, I feel really embarrassed. Do I point out that it's not cow? Like, hamburger is a pig. Everyone knows ham comes from pig. So I joked back. I was like, well, I want my pig cooked, well done. You're not supposed to eat pork like uncooked. Everybody knows that. That's why it's always been super weird to me that people will get like red in the middle on their burgers. And so she looks back at me and she goes, "You mean your cow?" And I'm like, I don't know how to have this conversation right now. Like, I'm not a teacher. I don't know how to educate you kindly. And I was like, sure, my cow. But it was so bizarre. I'm like, how do you not know? It's literally in the name. It's a hamburger. There's no hope for the world.
Yep. Clint's girlfriend gets all the ham she wants. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. My name is Luke Rudowski here of thebestpoliticalshow.com, and we are going to be going live for the next 2 hours with some really awesome and incredible human beings as we have some really important stuff to talk about, as there's a lot of breaking news now developing in Russia, in Ukraine, also a lot of crazy stuff developing in China, as there's other stories that are too hot for this particular platform to talk about that we're going to have to go to another platform in order to discuss, as of course you guys get to participate in the conversation. And one quick and easy way for you guys to do that is to check out LukeUnfiltered.com. It's our quasi-secret, not-so-secret society where we do cool things like nature hikes. Yes, you heard that correctly. We are organizing a nature hike this Sunday at the Libertarian National Convention, where you guys get to come out, touch grass with us. You guys get to also call into the show in about an hour and a half from now and be a part of the larger, really interesting conversations happening with some really fascinating human beings. We're also going to ask you guys to check out mysuperchat.com, a service that only takes a 3% service charge and allows your super chats to actually show up on screen. Yes, you heard that correctly. Check it out. If you give over $100, the Canadian school teacher bazunkas blow up on screen. You heard that correctly. And we thank everyone for supporting this independent media organization, as of course you guys getting the word out there really means a lot to us. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys doing it. As you can see, we have a little janky, little bootleg kind of setup here for the Libertarian National Convention. It's what we made do with, and it works. The audio's great, and we have, I think, some of the most brilliant, most powerful minds in the Libertarian Party here to discuss these larger ideas with us. The first guest is Dave Smith. Dave, thank you so much for coming in. For the people who don't know you, who are you and how would you introduce yourself? Then Clint, move his camera really quickly. Sorry. Clint, right here. Look at the camera.
This one?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, no problem. The fact that you say I'm one of the most brilliant minds in this party does not speak well for the party, but that you might be right. Yeah, I'm Dave. I'm a comedian and a podcaster, and yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's good to have you. We were at your comedy show yesterday. It was a pretty good show. It was really fun to see you out there just kind of riffing and rapping and making a lot of people laugh, which I think right now in our sad state of affairs is more important than ever. Josie, the redheaded libertarian, is also in the house. She's an incredible woman, and I would have to say one of the most kind of earnest people in this movement as well. Josie, for the people who don't know you, who are you and how would you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Josie. I'm the redheaded libertarian. I do outside media work at timcast.com and host a show called Spaces with Josie, where I've had on some really cool guests like Dave Smith, like Clint Russell.
Thomas Massey.
Like Thomas Massey, like Vivek Ramaswamy, like Scott Adams and AG Ken Paxton. And it's just really cool. You can check it out on X or become a member at timcast.com and help support our work over there.
Sweet. Clint is in the house.
Yo.
Busier than ever. New girlfriends in different area
Every
codes.
day,
I
dude.
mean,
Every
and then
day.
try to lean in a little bit more forward if you can.
A little bit more
A little bit forward. You could scoop in there. Come on, there you go. You're good.
At Liberty Lock Pod, if you want to support my work, you can subscribe there. I'll follow you back. Liberty Lockdown is the show. I also do Tower Gang. You should never ever watch that. And I'm also running for the vice presidency of the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen. God only knows why. I have been tricked by the seductress known as Dave Smith. And
Yeah, why'd you do it, Dave? It's all Dave's fault.
Oh, no, Clint's got, he's perfect for the job.
yeah, well,
I agree. I agree.
he's
He
got
has my
money, he's
personal
got no
endorsement.
kids. Get
Exactly.
out there.
Exactly. You know, questionable online activities. Perfect
Yeah.
for the party here.
Exactly.
And he has my full support and
oh
endorsement.
man, here we go. So yeah, tonight is the debate for those watching at home that aren't aware. There will be a debate between me and whoever the other vice presidential candidates are, and whoever wins that will then debate Vivek Ramaswamy, which is not a small task. Particularly, here's the challenge I have. All the libertarians that are seeing me around the convention, they're saying, "Dude, you gotta just destroy him." And I'm like, I have a lot of respect for the guy. Like I really do. And most important, like the biggest thing is, do we want to alienate GOP members that are responsible for basically making neoconservatism no longer popular? Like he destroyed Nikki Haley.
Yeah, I don't think you should treat him like an enemy at all. Like I think you should the attitude should be more like, it's kind of like, you're so great. Can you just also be great on these three things? You know, because like he really is. I do think that like the closest thing of any of the presidential candidates this year to an ally outside of the Libertarian Party. So and also it's not like he's not really a dude like that. Like I would, if I was debating Vivek and anyone was like, "Yo, you should destroy this guy," I'd be like, "Well, first of all, get that out of your head because he's not a guy who you can just destroy. He's a very talented guy, but it is also like." You know, there are a few areas, particularly his policies around China and Mexico, where it's like he's really, really bad on those issues. So I hope you get a chance to at least like make your case on those issues, because I mean, I know it appeals to like this kind of base thing in right wingers to be like, you know, I'm going to cut off all trade with China, and you're like, oh, okay. Okay, do you have any idea what that would look like? Right. Do you know like the devastation that would bring to the United States of America? Like, okay, you're not just going to be punishing the Chinese with that. You're going to be like, I mean, the level of price inflation that you would see over cutting off trade with China. It would make the price inflation of the last few years look like nothing.
Well, yeah, people don't understand how dependent we are on China. And just more importantly, how starting a war over the border in Mexico isn't really that smart. And it's going to, you know, bring over a more tumultuous situation when you could go after the root of the problem. And that, of course, is the war on drugs. And if you would deal with the war on drugs in a kind of libertarian perspective, in my opinion, I think the problem would be dealt with in a lot more of an advantageous way, have a lot less harm associated with it than, of course, just saying, yeah, we're going to make sure we break up these mafias that are going to create little mafias, and then we're going to have new Netflix specials for the next few decades showing the larger kind of cartel gang violence that's only going to, of course, escalate and grow from here, because that's what continues to happen here, also with the involvement of the intelligence agencies that spurred on and, of course, make it happen as well.
Well, 100%. But look, the combination of having a war on drugs and a de facto open border is just like such a deadly combination. So you're going to create a black market, and then you're going to have an easy way to move this black market in. And it's frustrating when you see like, you know, conservative types who are so like, you know, 100,000 people are dying of fentanyl every year, and look at these people pouring in. And you're like, well, yeah, look, you're right, you know, that we need border security, but it's also like, you got to just call it quits on this fucking whole thing of keeping drugs illegal. That's why all these people are dying of fentanyl, man. It's like, because they're getting shit that they don't even know what it is. Right. They're getting it, they're buying, you know, pain pills, or they're buying cocaine or whatever in the black market, and it's laced with fentanyl because that makes it so much more profitable. But man, if you get those fucking dosages off by the slightest bit, you kill people with that shit.
Well, and it's even worse than that, because it's not just a war on drugs with an open border. It's also a war on terror with a war on drugs with an open border. So we've already created a lot of animosity abroad. So like you add on to that the drug usage in America. Then you add on to that the psychological warfare that the American people have dealt with, and the depression, anxiety rates, things like that. Then you add in the advent of the internet and how everyone's kind of disconnected from one another, and then people are looking for any sort of outlet. It's like it's so multifactorial, and they just want a simple
almost
answer.
as if there's kind of a deliberate effort to try to destroy humanity from. It's almost as if they're putting pressure valves on all of society in order to create the worst potential human outcomes for everyone. So you know, it's like a little coincidence, like maybe a little accident. That's what's happening there,
just by chance.
Jumping back real quick to Vivek. He's very America first, not even in the Donald Trump "Make America Great Again" way. He's constitutional minded, and he's Bill of Rights minded, and he understands the founding fathers and what they went through, which is why his geopolitical views kind of concern me a little bit, because those weren't the views of our founders, and that seems to be kind of the premise that he goes on.
So I also one of the issues I have with Vivek is like, he's also, like, okay, the perfect example was, if you remember the way he dealt with the Israel-Palestine issue when he was in the presidential debates. It was like right after October 7th, he was still in the debates, and he was trying to take the non-interventionist position, but he would do it in this way where he was like, I'm going to tell Benjamin Netanyahu, you go kill those terrorists on your southern border, and I'm going to take out our terrorists on our southern border. So he's like kind of trying to make the non-interventionist point, but sell it in a way where it still sounds like I'm really supporting what Netanyahu's doing. But it's like, dude, you're not winning the presidency anyway. So just come out and say it. Just like actually take the non-interventionist position. Don't like try to sneak it in. And I'm not even saying you don't have to be me. You don't have to come out here and like condemn Israel and what they're doing to the Palestinians or whatever. But you could just come out and say, this is none of America's business. We need to have no part in the world. You know what I mean? Like, why not just go for it? And I think it's almost like one of these things where he was trying to make sure that he didn't alienate too much of the Trump base that kind of likes him. But you're like, yeah, but that's not why the Trump base likes Donald Trump. No. They don't like him because he's like trying to sugarcoat things. It's like, come on, man, that's the cool thing about being in your position. You got more money than God. You know what I mean? You're this long shot candidate. You get to tell the truth, dude. Like, that's so awesome. Like, but
yeah, I don't understand why we can't have principled anti-war people that are just like, hey, bombing people is wrong. Starting wars and financing them is wrong. And it's a basic principle that a lot of libertarians have that slowly is kind of growing on this larger MAGA movement. It's not there yet, but you just mentioned
the crazy thing about it, right, is because it's like there's all these different incentives, obviously, and there's all types of like powerful people who you alienate if you were to say that. But just the pure political incentive is all for it. And then there's something Ron Paul used to point out all the time, but like the peace candidate always wins. They always win. Like every single look, I'm not saying they're ever perfect, but Trump versus Hillary Clinton, Trump wins. Barack Obama versus John McCain, Barack Obama wins. You know what I mean? Even George W. Bush in the year 2000 ran on a non-interventionist, humble foreign policy. And there's, going back to Barry Goldwater, the reason he lost the race is because they turned him into the guy who was going to drop the bomb. You elect Barry Goldwater. Remember, that was the ad campaign against him, was like a nuke falling on a little girl or something. It's like, it's actually very popular with the American people to be like, hey, how about we don't go on mass murder campaigns? You guys down with that?
Yeah, I have a very jaded read of this because I think that Vivek probably agrees with us. If I'm being totally honest, like on who he is, I think he actually agrees with us. I think that it's donor-wise, it makes you unelectable, and I know that's like a hard thing to cope with, but like I honestly think that's probably why.
Yeah, and I think what the establishment wants is everyone saying, yes, I'm anti-war, but then secretly behind the closed doors are like, yeah, we'll continue the wars, don't worry about it, and then we'll kind of elect you. And then you made a very good point, because these policies, Dave, are extremely popular. People want them. People don't want their money going to war. People don't want war. They have to be psychologically tricked to them. We have to be psyopsed into them. We have to be convinced that somehow going over there, hurting those people is going to keep us safer. But in reality, it only endangers us that much more, and it creates a situation where the threat is now perpetual. It's never going to go away. It's always going to continue. It's always going to grow, as if it's kind of a larger kind of business model. So it is interesting to see this larger kind of Vivek kind of presence through this kind of movement, and is kind of tiptoeing around a lot of these kind of policies, because it is a game within a game, and there are so many different players. There are so many different kind of schemes. There are so many different ways that you could kind of traverse all these kind of larger political landscapes. But I think us as these libertarian anarchist voices have to be more vocal than ever, being like, this is the policy that makes sense. And with Vivek, the point that I wanted to make earlier is he's promising a lot of good stuff, but He hasn't been in office yet. He hasn't been tested. He hasn't faced the pressure valves of whatever the system kind of puts on these politicians that automatically makes them acquiesce to the current establishment thing that they always kind of acquiesce to. So I'm still a little skeptical on Vivek, like I am on any politician. I was skeptical of Ron Paul. I was skeptical of everybody. I was skeptical of Dr. No, an incredible individual that has led the path and has done incredible things for this movement. And if people listened to, the world would have been an incredible, way better off place than it is now. And that's why I have a T-shirt that says "If I Told You So" was a person, and it's a picture of Ron Paul on there, because it makes sense.
I think you have two paths that you can take. If you want to go the full populist route and go the full non-interventionist anti-war route, you have to do that and just rely on grassroots funding. And Vivek tried to do a hybrid. He tried to go like, I'm going to be the populist guy, but I'm also going to maintain that military-industrial complex funding for basically the war on drugs in Mexico and then defending Taiwan. And it's like, you can't, if you go the hybrid route, then you're going to lose. I think you lose everybody, because then you can't be trusted.
That's what Rand Paul did.
Exactly.
And it completely collapsed.
Yep.
It was like, he kind of thought that he could moderate the message and then maybe not be as radioactive to the establishment. But the establishment was like, you're not fooling us. You're Ron Paul's kid. You think we're going to let you in here? Like, there's no way. Well, and then all those young people who would run through walls for Ron Paul were just like, I don't know, I'm not that motivated by you because you're moderating the message. So I think there is something to that. But I will say one of the things that I think is so valuable about Vivek is that, one of the problems, a really, really big problem with the American populist movement is that for so long, every awful Republican has draped themselves in our message. They even call it Operation Iraqi Freedom. You know what I mean? They all pretend, and they all talk about. It's Nikki Haley just a few weeks ago talking about limited government. Like Nikki Haley, like as if there's, but that's what they all talk about, small government and like things like that. And so now everybody just rolls their eyes when you talk about that. But with Donald Trump's whole drain the swamp message, the only way to really drain the swamp is to drastically cut spending. Yeah. That's the swamp. Like, that's it. And at least Vivek would like take this kind of America First thing and like point it in the direction of like, what does it mean to be a Trumpian? I mean, it means abolish the deep state. It means cuts in spending. It means firing federal employees. Because it's almost like the idea that, spending went up every single year under Donald Trump. And the idea that you're draining a swamp if D.C. gets more money, that's just, it's by definition not true.
And I think the biggest distinction, especially with Vivek and Trump, was with the FBI building, with Trump saying, we'll give them a new building. They'll have a nice, really fancy building. And Vivek saying, no, how about we abolish the FBI? So with him being there and having those conversations, I'm very happy he's there. I don't agree with a lot of his other stuff, but at least the Overton window gets pushed. And I think right now, especially during the Libertarian National Convention, we have all the establishment people coming to us. Vivek's here. Donald Trump is here. This is an amazing moment where the libertarians that used to be laughed at, ignored, are all being vied to by these establishment forces saying, we might work with you guys. We could give you something. We could deliver something. And I think this is a key opportune kind of time where we don't want the flip-flopping. We don't want the waffling. We want policies that actually work, that are actually populist, that actually serve the American people, that treat America actually in a position where they are considered to be first rather than last, rather than over any other countries that lobbies our government successfully to the detriment of ours. Yeah, I think working towards that goal is something that's common sense, something that is becoming more popular than ever, but something that's becoming more necessary for these politicians to acquiesce to if they want our vote, if they want our support. And just like we saw with Ron Desantis, it was a very similar situation to what you just described with Rand Paul. Rand Paul kind of waffled. He was like, I'll be half establishment, half anti-establishment. Ron DeSantis did it too, and his entire campaign was just obliterated, destroyed, because he tried to play both sides.
But the thing is,
for people, it doesn't work like that.
But the difference, right, is that Rand Paul really was Ron Paul in his heart of hearts. And I mean, I know that. I remember I found Rand Paul during Ron Paul's 2008 presidential run because he would go out and give speeches for his dad. And I was so hyped because I was like, oh, there's a younger Ron Paul, man. And he could be here for a long time. And then he fucking ran for the Senate 2 years later and won. And he was in the Senate. Ron Paul's kid is in the Senate. And I listen his speeches, dude, on I don't know if you could even find him on YouTube, man. But if you go find him, they were so good. And he's talking about abolishing Medicare and Social Security. And he's talking about like blowing up the whole federal government is just great stuff. And then he tried to moderate. But like in the case of Ron DeSantis, the truth is that who he always was came out. He was always Zionist first. Yeah. That's always been Ron DeSantis. Like even back when he was in the House, he was hardcore Zionist. And so then it was like, he woke up on the COVID stuff. And he realized that it was going to be death for his state if he didn't, and he did a very good job reversing his initial, lockdowns and shit like that. But he was never actually there to challenge the establishment. That's why it made no sense to me that Massey was supporting him.
Well, his larger flip-flop on Ukraine and Russia, I think, was the biggest kind of tell about what he was up to, what he was doing, especially after that Tucker Carlson interview, because he came out and was like, all right, you gave a very generalized, kind of open-ended statement that could be interpreted in any different way. He got a little bit of pushback by the corporate media, calling him an anti-interventionist. Automatically, big donors kind of swooped in, gave him a bunch of money, and then he said, no, we got to get rid of Putin. Putin, bad man. Bad man we have to get rid of now, immediately, and totally changed his statement, which wasn't strong even in the first place, and highlighted just how easily he was able to be bought off, just how easily he was able to flip-flop.
It's all run by the military-industrial complex. Had Ron DeSantis run on a states' rights platform, that could have been popular with the people. However, it wouldn't be popular with the establishment still. So, because like you said, he did great. He does great on the trans and kids stuff. He does great on COVID. I moved to Florida for his policies because I am a very states' rights first libertarian. And that's kind of the idea that I got from him. I mean, he wasn't perfect, but then when he came out with very pro-war, came out of kind of left field with that, and he just collapsed after that. That wasn't what everybody really loved about him.
Because he was running against Trump, I think it was kind of obligatory that he courted the Mike donors, because like Trump is going to be the guy who he is going to signal that he's in the non-interventionist camp, and if Ron comes out and he's like, hey, I'm going to be good on lockdowns, so like some of the populist conservatives that don't like Trump, they'll support me. Well, I'm going to now be the Mike guy. I'm going to be the George Bush, part 3 or whatever. And that's not what the American people are looking for, though. So like you can't court the American people and the donors at the same time. And I think that's a really good sign, though, because that means that we are winning the culture war. And the culture war is now like, hey, we're done. We're done with this military adventurism. We've completely lost it financially, economically. We're in being tatters.
I like Ron DeSantis as my governor in Florida, and he can't touch foreign policy when he's here as my...
He's fantastic.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He could be king of Florida for all that I care. Like, I know that they don't have that policy. Like in Massachusetts, you can become king of Massachusetts, but they have term limits here in Florida, unfortunately, because I don't know what comes after him, and that's a little bit alarming to me. But, we got to hope that, like you said, we are winning, and it will be a winning candidate in governorship to come.
This is one thing we're trying to get Massey in here with us, and this is one thing I really want to ask him about.
I'll tell him not to come.
Don't you dare.
About why he supported Ron DeSantis?
Yeah.
I already asked him.
Well,
I asked him about it. I asked him about it when he was on my show.
Thomas Massey came on to my show, Spaces with Josie. You can become a member at timgas.com or follow me on X over there and watch it there. But he came on my show, and him and Ron DeSantis are really, really good friends.
And their wives are really good friends.
Their wives, their families do things together. They're just great friends. And then when they were in Congress together, he was very much a Liberty candidate or a Liberty congressman when he was in Congress with Massey. And so they just aligned in that route. They kind of have similar vibes, they're just good friends, and that's really what it came down to. He really respects Ron DeSantis as a human being, even if he doesn't agree with all of his policies.
I asked him to, I was like, but look at how awful he is on foreign policy, and he was like, Massey was basically like, well, Dave, Ron Paul's not walking through that door, so I don't know.
And if you remember, Mitt Romney was also endorsed by Rand Paul. and I remember getting in trouble with Rand Paul.
This was a huge, by the way, for people, because you were like hardcore in the movement back then, as was I. That was a huge moment in the liberty movement that really, really started setting Rand Paul down the path of alienating a lot of us, because it was a huge thing that Ron Paul never endorsed who the nominee was. And they would always ask him to. Because if you could, in 2008, and this was in 2012, but both years, Ron Paul is sitting on this like electric support of young people. And then when it's all over, everyone's like, hey, are you going to throw your support behind John McCain now? And like Ron Paul would be like, John McCain? Are you like, no? What? Why would I remember one time they go, what would it take for you to endorse John McCain? And Ron Paul goes, well, he would just have to change his foreign policy, his economic policy, and his monetary policy, and then I'd consider it. And I was like, yeah, that's a good answer. But anyway, what happened was Rand Paul endorsed Mitt Romney while Ron Paul's campaign was still going. And that was like this crazy blow that all of us were so furious about.
Yeah, I was furious too, and I had a lot of questions about it because there was still a lot of fundraising happening. I knew a lot of people that were personally putting in every last kind of dollar that they had towards Ron Paul. Ron Paul was still running. His son's endorsing Mitt Romney right after the Bilderberg group meeting. So I had a couple choice words for Rand Paul, and I asked him, and then there was a big confrontation, and then then there was a lot of other drama that happened behind the scenes that I don't want to get into, but it was wild. I'm like, are you kidding me? And it was kind of a low point where my loved ones were being affected for questioning Rand by Rand. But again, no hard feelings. There's a lot of really kind of interesting things that happen in politics. Tulsi Gabbard, another person who a lot of people believe could potentially even become the VP for Donald Trump, endorsed Joe Biden before. So these endorsements are something that I think are key hallmarkers to look at, but they don't always dictate who is kind of being endorsed, but they do kind of indicate about how people kind of play the game and the larger kind of political game that happens. As of course, I have an article here pulled up describing how Nikki Haley is now saying that she will be voting for Trump in November. This after there was a lot of rumors, there was a lot of speculations about her potentially doing a contested convention at the GOP primary that, of course, is going to be happening. And the primary, of course, is over. But when it comes to the delegates selecting their candidates, there was a lot of kind of rumors that she might be swooping in. She's addressing those rumors right now and saying, no, I'm going to be voting officially for Donald Trump. What do you make of her endorsement, as I think it kind of highlights a lot of the other endorsements that we were talking about? People just kind of saying it, but kind of playing a larger game here. What's the game that they're playing with Donald Trump?
It sounds like a deal was made, for sure.
Well, to me, it's really simple. The cases against Trump are falling apart. Nikki Haley's entire path was, well, if this dude gets locked up, maybe the delegates at the convention say we can't have this guy who's behind bars be our candidate, and then the delegates just opt to put somebody else. She's
campaigning, so I guess she is the one.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So now she realizes, oh, Trump's not going to jail, so I better get in good with the guy who's probably going to be the next president.
Well, and I think, look, I'm not saying there hasn't been a deal made. It's quite possible, but I don't know. I wouldn't even jump to that conclusion. I think there's just no other game in town, and for her to have any future, she's gotta look. That's what happened with Desantis ultimately, right? He was like he got out and he was like, look, I know if I'm ever gonna be a factor in Republican politics again, it's not as if Donald Trump, when it comes to Republicans, isn't just like the front runner. He's the only run. I mean, the margins that he was winning these primaries on is the overwhelming majority of Republican voters believe the guy is the legitimate president currently, right? Like there's a certain loyalty to him that there's just essentially at this point is part of the reason why I'm in the Libertarian Party. There's like no room to be a Republican who's not just kissing Donald Trump's ass. And there's just like no, and this is, everybody's made their decisions with that already. But yeah, Nikki Haley has to fucking walk back into that umbrella. Otherwise she can never run for anything again.
Just look at Vivek in Iowa when we were there, actually. He was asked by a Trump supporter, hey, why are you doing this? And he's like, well, look.
Save him.
Yeah,
Gotta save Donald Trump.
He's like, well, but his angle was actually pretty reasonable. He's like, look, this guy may go to jail, and like we need to have someone who at least can carry the torch. And he's like, I could be that guy for you. And the Trump camp was just like, oh no, you don't.
Yeah. The Trump camp was very offended by that, and they're like, "What's going on here? You think you're going to take over here, little brown man? Not going to happen here." And they kind of pushed them away, and he's now a larger kind of surrogate for Donald Trump. Now there was kind of internal drama because one of his kind of aides was trying to hire a bunch of Trump supporters to support RFK Jr. So a lot of different stuff was also happening behind the scenes. We have some super chats that I think would be good to read. We got one from Libertarian Goth who says, "Tell the truth. Are you sorry for party rocking?" Are you guys sorry for party rocking?
Not at all.
I'm not.
Never apologize for party rocking.
Red Viking says, "Fredo is so slick. How will Dave punch through?" That's a good question.
Tune in.
As everyone knows, Dave Smith is going to be
Dave
debating Fredo.
Yeah, he doesn't want to give up the secrets. But
We heard a little bit of the secrets last night. It's pretty good. It's good stuff. So it's going to be a great debate that I
Next
hope people
Friday,
tune
right?
into.
Yes, sir.
The debate hosted by Patrick Bet-David between Andrew Cuomo and Dave Smith. So that's going to be fun. That's going to be a lot of fireworks.
Is it-
3 hours. That's a lot, man.
is
Yeah,
it sold out?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. It definitely will sell out. So grab tickets if you want to come. But yeah, I'm so happy I get 3 hours to work with because it's
That's a
just
lot.
it makes it's like, oh, we can hit everything. That's great.
Yeah. You're going to dissect his soul over 3 hours.
Josie, we want him to show up. All right. So let's all just everybody
It's gonna
be
be a
cool.
respectful
Everybody be cool.
conversation,
Very
respectful.
respectful. Yes, absolutely.
Clint, if you can't just move the camera a little bit. We got another super chat here from Andrew Jacob saying, "Go Clint and Josh, go." Hi, Josie, Steph, and Dave. Thank you, Andrew.
What's up,
for that.
dude?
We got another one from Little Drinky Poo who says, "There's a lot of money that people make off of America being the global dominant power. Are these examples in history and others than violent revolutions that people peacefully took back power from an empire? Are there any kind of those moments or institutions?"
Can you repeat that?
Are there other violent revolutions that people peacefully took back power from an empire?
So
Just
it
the
wouldn't be-
Revolutionary War.
Yeah, but he's asking for peaceful, and that's not peaceful. So
That was peaceful.
Well, I think
was it?
It was mostly peaceful.
Mostly peaceful.
Mostly peaceful revolution.
if CNN is reporting on it. It is
Well, look, I mean,
peaceful.
so the example to look to there would be the collapse of the Soviet Union. I mean, which really did not involve. There were conflicts that broke out, but it wasn't like it didn't involve a war in order to dissolve the Soviet Union. And
but
so
people
like,
could argue that that was because of the U.S. and CIA, State Department activity to undermine them.
yeah, well, look, I mean, there certainly was a lot of that, right? So it's like it's kind of hard to point to just one thing.
Yeah.
So there was that. It also was just an economically untenable, system, and it also kind of unwinded a few different times. Like Lenin basically rolled back communism, and then Stalin took over and kind of reinstituted communism because like Lenin toward the end there was almost like, oh, okay, you can have businesses and money and prices again and stuff because everything was going so bad. And then Stalin came in and was like, no, we're going hardcore Marxist again. Right. There were waves of kind of rolling it back and moving forward, but the point is the whole thing went away, and whether that was from outside forces, which certainly was part of it, but it is an example of like how it didn't require a huge civil war or something like that in order to do it. So
And it didn't require a nuclear exchange, which a lot of people thought was impossible.
Thought was inevitable at a certain point. And so, I think there's no reason why we can't have some degree of hope that we wouldn't need a bloody revolution to unwind the system.
Well, also, when you look at kind of capitalism and technological innovations, they do create a lot of revolutionary change in our society. And usually a bullet doesn't have to be fired. It has to be a printing press that prints out a newspaper or a Bible or allows people to kind of communicate and talk to each other.
Well, what concerns me is like you're right, but if what we learned actually over the past year, but really over the past week, because Schellenberger has the Twitter leaks 2.0 that just came out, and it basically shows step by step that the CIA or former intelligence community members, which are not really former, were actively becoming the moderation branch at Twitter, like old Twitter. And when you realize that was happening at Twitter, you have to obviously acknowledge it was happening at all major social media sites. So, like, yes, we have this incredible advancement in innovation and technology, communication, all these things, but simultaneously you have a really advanced federal government that is also deeply embedded in that, and it's actively trying to undermine it. So, like, which wins out? Obviously, I hope the people do.
Well, look, I mean, I'm somewhat optimistic on that front because it does kind of seem, even though there's all this like intelligence like interference in social media, you still see that it still kind of feels like it's a guy standing up on a wave trying to like physically stop the wave from coming, and it's like you just can't, dude. Like, it's going to get around you no matter how. I mean, look, dude, TikTok, which I've never had the TikTok app, and like, I think it's bad for your brain and all that shit, but I know this just because I've never had one, but other people had like TikTok accounts for me where they like post my clips. Shit gets taken down constantly. It's one of the worst of like always censoring shit. And look at them, they're trying to shut down the whole thing. And it ain't over China, you know what I mean? It's over a different foreign country. And it's because they've totally lost the narrative. Like, even on the app that censors everything you're not allowed to say, they find a way around it. They took down the hashtag Bin Laden was right, but then people find another way to hashtag it, another way to post it. And like, it does seem like, like this show and so many others, like it's almost like, I don't know how they turn that back.
Yeah. Well, Free Palestine trended for like 6 months straight on TikTok. And then you see the push to ban it and you're like, oh.
Dude, in any other time, look, man, there's no question that part of the reason why this war has become so unpopular is that, number one, they can't, what the Zionists always rely on is this basically lies about the history, lies about what's going on, lies about everything. And now they can't control the other side from being able to present their argument. And it's such a more compelling argument. Like, it's just, to anybody being honest, who's not either like corrupt, bought and paid for, or just picked a side and is just trying to win, the Destiny type guys like that, who's just like basically starting from his conclusion and then let me use all of my verbal intelligence to find a justification for this. But anyone who's just looking at it, like, honestly, you just be like, yeah, I mean, you guys have been occupying them since 1967. What the fuck? It's 2024. You can't just do that. You can't occupy someone that. I mean, maybe you have some justification for like 3 years after a war, we held on to them and then we kind of granted them their free. But from 67 to 2024.
Imagine if
we actually have a bunch of articles pulled up on that specific story for the next segment on the next platform where we could freely discuss them a little bit better.
I'll let that go. But anyway, the broader point that I'm just making is that it's just like, look, dude, like, you know this, Luke, you've been in this game like long enough now. Even just 20 years ago, if this same war was going on, the narrative would be totally controlled. And you wouldn't see the images that you're seeing out of it. And you wouldn't see all of the podcasts and all the different people who can present like these other sides. You just wouldn't see any of that. You'd get CNN and the New York Times. And what did they just say from that New York Times leak that came out a few months ago? All the words they're not allowed to say. And then you look at it, they're not allowed to call it the occupied territory. You can't say occupied territory. So you got to write a piece and be like, the area in which another military tells you when you can and can't go outside.
I have a question.
How about that?
Do you think that the reason why the ICC came out and said anything at all is because we're seeing what's actually going on now because of social media? Do you think
I think it's enormous political pressure from people. Yeah, and for that reason.
There's legitimate conversations right now happening about the arrest of Netanyahu, which we're going to be getting into in a little bit, as of course. I want to save face here on this particular platform that really doesn't like you talking about these particular issues. Some other super chats here is we got one from the past is alive saying, where's David Icke? Where has he been at lately? Long-time watcher. Thank you for all you do. We might do a special trip to the United Kingdom. And when we do, we probably will be doing a sit-down podcast episode with David. He is a very interesting human being and definitely offers some very unique perspectives on the world that are always fascinating to kind of listen to. We got another super chat here from Laneboy6 saying, hey, Dave, thanks for being the GOAT in foreign policy debates. I saw you in Tacoma on the 4th. Also, all your JRE episodes are bangers. I share them with all my friends. America first is inevitable. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Well, Lane, you gotta tune into part of the problem. Come on, man. You can't just be pushing Rogan.
Yeah, dude.
Thanks, Lane boy.
Yeah, man. If you, I mean, let him get the push. He needs a little bump.
Yeah, we all got to help him.
No,
Go support Joe Rogan. Subscribe to his podcast.
Not enough people listen to Rogan.
He's starting off. He needs all the help he could get. So
He's got. I think he might have competition for the first time though with Tucker, man. I
Yeah.
think Tucker's thing is going to blow up. I got a huge response from that episode. But anyway, thank you to that guy. Thanks for coming out. Tacoma was a lot of fun.
All right, let's talk about the news. As of course, today we just got breaking news that Putin allegedly wants a Ukrainian ceasefire on the current front lines. As we're getting the news reports that he wants a freeze on the war where the current front lines are, saying that the Kremlin is, quote, ready for peace talks if Russia retains the borders along the current front line. This is surprising news, as of course Russia has just launched their major offensive inside of Ukraine. Is it a larger ploy of disinformation in war? Do they truly want peace? As of course it's important to note here that they have a significant portion of the Donbass region already. The Donbass region, which is very key and strategic to them, along with Crimea, which they've been fighting for. Is this something that we should be taking as credible news, or is this something regarding something else happening behind the scenes that we still might not be knowing of? What do you guys think is going on here? As of course, I think what he's kind of proposing is what he's been proposing all along. He wants the Donbass region. He wants Crimea. He wants a kind of barrier between Ukraine. He wants a buffer zone.
Yep.
And as a lot of military analysts kind of point out, even though he started the war, that he's always been kind of willing to negotiate. He's always been the party willing to, of course, try to stop it, while the other side is always accused of derailing and stopping these conversations from happening.
What's funny is that, so it was a couple years ago now when the first time I went on Rogan after the war had broke out, and that clip is still the most viral thing I've ever done in my career. It had 10 million views on YouTube, and then was just on everything, like a million different versions of it. I mean, I don't know how tens of millions of people saw it. And it was so funny because it was like all the blue check journalists, back at the time when blue checks meant you were in the corporate media or whatever, they were all furious about it. Joe Scarborough was talking shit about me and like all these things. What an idiot he is. He thinks this has anything to do with NATO expansion. This war has nothing to do with NATO expansion. And then just late last year, it was what was it? Jens Stoltenberg. Stoltenberger. Whatever. Norwegian names. Sorry, Luke. I know that's close.
It's very close.
But
my people's.
But
He came out
and just said it.
Yep.
And he said, to your point, that he was ready to negotiate. That Vladimir Putin said before that, he goes, "I won't invade if you just put in writing that you're not going to put Ukraine into NATO." And so he was always kind of ready to deal with that. And then, of course, we all know the peace negotiations were underway early in 2021.
I think March.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
as soon as the conflict started, they were at the negotiation table.
And so, and then Boris
Johnson.
I keep wanting to say Boris Yeltsin, but different.
They
Boris
look very
Johnson.
they look very similar. Yeah.
Boris Johnson went in to break it up. Now, all that aside, to your fundamental question there, I would take this with a grain of salt. I mean, who knows if he's really proposing this or this is some type of war tactic. Hopefully, this is real, and we could wind this thing down.
The reason I think that it should be taken seriously is that it's been very clear to me that Russia does not want to escalate into a wider war with NATO.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And NATO is ramping up. I mean, they are starting to put in more and more munitions. You have congressmen over the past week that are on the House floor arguing that we need to allow Ukraine to start using American munitions to strike inside of Russia.
And they already have. So we have the news reports that there's already 2 American-made missiles that were just shot at Crimea just a couple of moments ago. 8 ATACMS missiles from the United States that were just launched on Crimea.
That's very dangerous. And the other reason this is a little bit of confirmation bias, but this was like a major point of contention in my debate against Destiny about 12 months ago. And he was saying, no, look, it's clear that Putin's going to take over all of Ukraine and then he's going to move into Poland and then blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no.
Was he really making that argument?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not just him. A lot of people.
Yeah,
a lot of people.
I know, but
argument.
it's just the worst, dumbest argument.
It's ridiculous. And my point was, like, I think that he wants east of the Dnieper. Like, that's what he wants. He wants the east of that, because that's where the primary Russian speaking, they already had the referendum. Like, that's where you can actually have a peaceful a lasting peace, because you have people that largely want to be Russian anyways, and then you can have the people that want to be Ukrainian and hate the Russians and hate Putin to maintain their land, and you maintain a buffer between you and NATO. It's like that has been the most likely outcome as far as I can tell from the beginning of this war. So it doesn't surprise me that he's still saying, yeah, this is what I want. If we can have a ceasefire here, like this can work.
Yeah, the longer this war goes on, the longer it's not going to end. And you know, that's a pretty clear statement in itself. But the less chances Russia has of settling here, because they're invested, they're heavily invested. They just started up their war machine. They just started up their economy. They just started up conscripting a whole bunch of people, and they're kind of ready to go. And they have shown that the Russian war machine, and then we know this lesson historically as well, specifically with Russia kind of starting off conflicts in a very poor way. But then when that Russian war machine starts up, it's a huge Goliath to deal with that usually overpowers through just sheer manpower a bunch of individuals. Now, the United States is using kind of advanced drone warfare, which is terrifying, especially when we see the clips on Reddit and on Twitter go viral everywhere, highlighting just the utter decay and destruction of human bodies that are just being blown to pieces. For me, the issue is simple. I just want my Slavic people to stop hurting each other, stop killing each other, stop murdering each other, end this conflict. The Ukrainians are going to be arguing, no, we need all of our territory back. And only then, when we get all of our territory back, then we could call it a victory. Then they're going to have to pay back those loans that the United States and Donald Trump gave them with the latest kind of military push. And the Russians are saying, no, we invested in this. This is our people. This is our territory. So, you know, what should be the decision that's made here? I want to leave the question to you guys. But for me, I think peace should be on the table. I think the peace needs to be a priority here, regardless of the terms. Both parties are going to come unsatisfied with what's going to be developing here. But there has to be an end to this, because the longer this goes on, the longer the whole world is threatened with a nuclear holocaust. This is ridiculousness. This is insanity. This is stupidity at the highest level of government, vying for more taxpayers. This is dumb. This is stupid. This is pointless. It needs to end immediately. What are those conditions? What are those terms that you guys think would be fair? Are the terms that Putin is offering here fair? And would you agree to them?
I mean, who's to say what is fair? I mean, this is ultimately like might makes right. War has began. Might makes right at this junction, and that's unfortunate. That's not what libertarians like to think about, but it's the reality. Like, you're not going to extricate the Russian forces from the eastern portion of Ukraine without bringing full NATO war to them. Like, that's not going to happen. So I think that
even then they'd keep Crimea. The whole world might be destroyed, but you're not taking Crimea from Vladimir Putin.
I totally agree, and I think that was the major catalyst for this. But so from my vantage point, like what is reasonable at this point is whatever stops the death, and the death would stop if you basically partition Ukraine essentially straight down the middle. And I think that has always been the likely outcome. What concerns me most is that this was essentially, I mean, this is actually even more land than they were looking for at the beginning of this war, when they were willing to end the war right away. And Antony Blinken and the State Department instructed Boris Johnson to shuttle it. Yeah. So it's clear to me that the American State Department does not want peace. And as long as that's the case, I don't know how we change it. Because Zelensky is not an autonomous being. He's just doing whatever our State Department says, as best I can tell.
Clint, are you suggesting a two-state solution for Ukraine?
Well, yes. I mean, every war ends with a two-state solution, or the alternative is ultimately, a full annihilation.
Yes, I think
or an
something
occupation
has to
in the case of Palestine. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, look, the broad, ideas for a peace here have been pretty obvious from the very beginning, and that's why they had that deal worked out. And then you're right, Clint, that Russia's going to get more than they would have been willing to negotiate then. But look, I mean, you want the killing to stop. That's the best thing Donald Trump said on the campaign trail. That should be the number one priority for any decent person. You want people to stop getting slaughtered.
How do you deal with the fact that Trump said that, but then simultaneously he's getting credited with the additional $60 billion that went to the war?
Oh, because Donald Trump is on every side of every issue, and you can always count on him to get rolled and fall on the wrong side of it. You know, I mean, that's just, we got 4 years proof of that already, and it's just kind of happening more. It's pretty tragic. That this is the guy who's supposed to be the great hope to turn this whole thing around and drain the swamp, but the swamp just rolls him at every shot. But look, there is also something to be said for like you were talking about, like kind of from the libertarian position, this like might makes right stuff, and there is something where, you know, sometimes like when, particularly not this last time, but the time before when I was on Rogan, we kind of talked about the whole history of Israel, and I got a lot of people like from the more radical kind of pro-Palestinian side criticizing me, where they're like, well, Dave, I mean, look, you just laid out how it was totally illegitimate the way these Zionists came in and kicked all these people out and formed their country. So why are you advocating for a two-state solution on 1967 borders, when really what you should be advocating for is that the Israelis got to go back to Europe, and all of this is for the Palestinians?
1948.
And it's like, yeah, but you lost that. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, there's only so much retroactive justice you can impose, in the same sense that it's like, yeah, we're not giving the land back to the Native Americans, and that we're not, listen, Israel's not going away. Like, that's just not, there's no conceivable, plausible path toward that. So, like, what is there a path toward? Okay, well, there is a path toward Gaza and the West Bank belong to you, and the fucking Israelis got to stop fucking controlling that. You know, like, that's more reasonable. And same with this. I mean, obviously it's a little different because it's not generations later, where you would basically have to do another Nakba to the Jews in order to get them out. And there's a bunch of people who's like, they didn't do anything to you. Maybe their grandfather did. Okay, maybe they still are. But in the original Nakba, they weren't a part of that. But with this, it's like, yeah, look, you could probably make some type of sovereignty argument that Ukraine should get all of Ukraine back, but they're not going to. So here in the real world, if your goal is to stop people from dying any further, it's like, yeah, Vladimir Putin basically gets to dictate terms because he won. He won this fucking war. He's producing more munitions than all of Europe and America combined. He won. Turns out we're not as powerful as we thought. And so if Zelensky is left controlling a little something, if he's left controlling the western portion of Ukraine, then he should be happy for that at this point.
I agree.
Yeah, Zelensky is only in power right now because of martial law. His term ran up a few days ago. So that's the democracy.
No elections. Yeah.
That's the democracy that we're defending.
Democracy doesn't always involve elections. You should know that.
Yeah, well, this is. Yeah, I mean, if they say it's democracy, it's usually warmongering.
Well, what's better democracy than one that, you know, closes churches, arrest the parishioners on Easter?
Yeah, those things are risks to democracy.
Yep.
You got to
These are
close
threats.
all of that.
Jails,
a free
journalists.
press is a risk to democracy.
Jails American journalists.
Pretty wild.
I found these comments by Putin very interesting, mainly because it definitely doesn't look like the war for the Ukrainians is going well. You look at their kind of U.S.-supplied glide bombs. They're, according to The Guardian, they're struggling against Russian jamming. There's also a very interesting article here from Zero Hedge describing how now Ukraine is enforcing desperate conscription laws as Russian troops move closer in on Kharkiv, the second largest city in all of Ukraine. So why is Putin now coming to the negotiations table? As a lot of people say,
I have a thought on that.
Yeah, a lot of people say the longer this war goes on, the less likely Russia is to ever kind of want peace here. That's the point that I was trying to make here originally, instead of that really dumb one that I made originally. Again, there's a lot of lives on the line. This is ridiculous. This just needs to end. I don't care who's going to get what. Just stop. Just frickin' stop putting us on the brink of war. But the deep state, the intelligentsia, always needs a war, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Libya, whether it's Iraq. There's always a perpetual war, in my opinion, to justify larger human trafficking, drug trafficking that wouldn't be able to happen unless it was these larger kind of foreign conflicts that they get the excuse to conduct all of these larger experiments and larger kind of psyopses on people. Josie, what do you think is your theory of why Putin now is coming to the negotiation table? As, of course, some people are saying, hey, it could be those $60 billion that Donald Trump is sending over there that could be making that significant difference that could have Putin saying, yeah, maybe I don't want to continue this for that much longer.
Oh, they said that was going to be it. They're not going to send any more money over there. So I think that he felt like it was a good time to get in there and say, all right, you either got to beat me with the $60 billion or have a peace deal, and so it was kind of like an opportune moment in my opinion. But I want to jump back to something that you said about conscription. So they started conscripting women who were in the medical field between 20 and 60. So they were putting 60-year-old grandmothers, who were dental hygienists, because that counts in the trenches to saw off the limbs, because that they're really out of people, they're out of men. So I mean, once your country is conscripting women and grandmothers to fight your war, your country is no longer a country. There's nothing left you're fighting for except for land.
Yeah, when you look on the front lines and see a bunch of dudes with Down syndrome, it doesn't necessarily suggest you're winning the war.
Unless you're watching Tower Gang.
Which you definitely should not.
That should be your next co-host. He
Just
deserves to be there.
the
He
front lines from
looks
Ukraine.
exactly like the other guy.
Yeah, we don't put our Down syndrome little boys on the front lines of wars. We just run them for president of the Libertarian Party.
Can someone put Toad's face on that guy? I think
Of course.
that would be,
I mean, it already
hilarious,
was basically
to
Toad's
do
face.
here. As now we're going to finally transition off of this platform and other censorious technocratic platforms and going over to free speech platforms, where now we could, we kind of already said what we wanted already. We kind of already pushed the line here, but it's okay. We're going to push it even further. Right now, as we're going to make the transition off of YouTube, we're going to go towards a platform that has supported us really well. That platform we can't even mention here, because when we do, the YouTube algorithm literally picks it up and automatically downranks this video and shows it to less people. But if you go to this website, which we're highlighting to you right now, we were currently on the front page, the number one pick, the number one selected live show right now. The conversation will be continuing for an additional hour right now on this particular platform.
We are number one over Ben Shapiro right now. I love it. I love to see it.
I'm
Yeah,
dropping that link in the comments for everybody here watching from my page.
Awesome. Before we make the transition over, I want you guys to plug your stuff and where people could find you. Dave, as we move over to a free speech platform, where can people support and check out more of your work?
Part of the problem is my podcast and comicdavesmith.com. If you want to come see a live show, all my ticket links and stuff are up there.
Josie, where can people support you?
You can come to x.com, TRHL official, or you can become a member at timcast.com and help support our work.
Dave never likes to plug this, but he also does Legion of Skanks, and it's fucking fantastic. So make sure you check
I'm
that
not
out.
on that show.
Liberty Lockdown is the show. You can find me on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere. Just search Liberty Lockdown and at Liberty Lockpod on X. Clint Russell's the name. That's it.
All right, guys. A lot of you guys are watching on this technocratic, centralized digital gulag. Please make your way over outside of this gulag to this free speech platform that we will continue the conversation on and get into all the spicy issues that we cannot on YouTube, as of course we have a lot to discuss in a totally unfiltered way. Come out to the nature hike this Sunday. It's going to be late morning, early afternoon here in Washington, D.C. Bring your friends, bring your family members. I did 2 of these already. They're awesome. They're incredible. It's a great way to touch grass. It's a great way to be in nature, to do something that's very positive for your health and mental well-being. People need